I feel like most people know you, so I don't think we need to do a ton of background, Chase. But I do think, we might have some listeners who are newer to the space and maybe aren't familiar with how Twitter famous you are and maybe don't know much about your background. Or maybe people have been following you for a while and you just haven't shared much about your background. So can we start with maybe just like a brief how'd you wind up on Solana?
Yeah, for sure. So I was an engineer for about 11 or 12 years. I can't remember. It's been so long ago because I'm a crypto boomer, or I'm just a boomer in general almost. But so I was working in like full stack Java for like probably the first 8 years of my career, or maybe first 6 years or seven. Then I went to full stack JavaScript, working in like government contracting. I actually worked on like I know Nick has a military background. I actually worked with the sort of government, like military insurance, like program. The name's eluding me at this point, but it was this mass. They used to do it by hand. It would actually, like, they could get one sort of insurance claim in the military done in like 3 months because they literally would just walk into this massive room and grab a book off of a shelf and get their pen out, and like that's how they did
I
it,
mean,
and
that
it would take
sounds
like three
like
months for
government
one.
efficiency.
Yes, yeah. So we built we well, I mean, we it was like 150 people built a system to sort of like make people in the military be able to get their insurance claims way faster. So super boring stuff. It was horrible. It was like Spring MVC, full stack stuff, and then I started exploring like Node.js and all these different things in the JavaScript world until roughly 2017. Started buying some Ethereum, made a bunch of money, lost it all in 2018. But along the way, I found this project called Ken, and I joined a developer program that they had, and like we were like one of the top prizes. We built a tip bot on Ken, and eventually started asking for jobs, and all their jobs were in Israel, for devs, and they said we have this thing called developer advocacy. A developer advocate role in the US, and I was like, well, what the fuck is that? Anyways, I really wanted to like leave my boring sort of 9 to 5 life, and did a little bit of research on developer advocacy and relations, and how that all evolved from essentially Steve Ballmer. And it was just about like teaching people how to build, growing communities, like get people to like start building on a developer platform. So I did that for a couple years. Eventually they migrated onto Solana. And as that process went through, I was involved with it. I found out about Solana like way early, like mid 2020 or something like that. And then my migration happened roughly around December. And that's when I like had learned enough about Solana and Toli and everything that was going on. And it, I say this line often, but it's like, this is either like a giant scam or like this is like the next big thing, you know, that was like Ethereum, except way faster, like from the outside without getting like too technical about it. And then I actually ended up, I always forget this part of the story, but I left Ken and I joined Circle as a developer advocate for 2 days until I found out that role at Solana and started DMing Raj and Dan Albert, who's head of the foundation, or one of the leaders of the foundation, and just begging for a job and being like, hey, I helped you guys like do all this migration stuff from Ken to Solana. And then a few days later, Raj called me, and then a few days after that, I had an offer as the first like developer advocate here. All there was core
So
docs.
someone at Circle, so someone at Circle loves you
Yeah,
because you were
I
just the
brought it
best
up to
employee
him, and
for 2 days.
I luckily I'd only met him and like one other person, and like he actually was super understanding. I was like, dude, like it was like Circle's awesome, but like it's a very corporate sort of environment and entity where there's probably like 12 layers deep of like management systems. And like I looked over at Solana and I was like, I bet you that shit's really crazy behind the scenes. Like there's just like probably a shit show. That's where I want to work.
You
Not
just want
even
to work when
joking.
you're living by the
I
seat of
think
your pants.
yeah, like I was
Oh
like,
man.
there's so much going on over there that probably is like just so crazy, and like I thrive in those environments. So I joined. All there were core docs at the time, so it was really just like, okay, what the hell do I do? And I asked Dan Albert, and he was like, choose your own adventure. And I was like, okay, thanks for the advice. And then just started building out this part-time advocacy program, which Jacob and Donnie and most of these guys eventually got hired from. It's just like watching and observing where people were having problems. There was no way to build. You literally just had to go look at the code and read the tests to see how to do things on Solana. This was before Solana Cookbuzz for anything. The only thing that existed was the Pollex escrow tutorial outside of the core docs, and that's all people had. So only people like gigabrains like Armani and like Max from Mango and a handful of these other guys could even figure out how to build on Solana. Everybody else was just like, I don't even know how to send a transaction. Um, so yeah, that was pretty much the start of it, and like now here we are.
Now they're like all of us noobs have such an easy path by
Yeah, so
comparison.
much easier. There's
Yeah, I
a
would
lot
say
less
it's
glass
pretty.
now,
It's
but it's still
decently.
there's still like some glass to chew.
Yeah, I think a lot of the glass actually gets chewed by some of the more like lower level infrastructure people. Like if you're coming on to build dApps, like you're not really chewing a ton of
Mhm.
glass. There's so many composable pieces. A lot of times you don't even need to write smart contracts anymore because all the little just like plug
Yeah.
and play, which is like the ultimate goal. And
Composability,
like
that's like,
what
yeah,
the
it's
whole
the goal.
yes, that was the whole thing. And like now people are seeing like, oh shit, like I don't have to do an NFT smart contract, or I don't have to like do all these other things. You know, you have like messaging with say dialect, you have NFTs with Metaplex, you have gum for socials, and like these things just like more and more of that stuff keeps happening. So it's super exciting to see it.
One of the coolest things to me when I first started learning Solana was that I could spin up tokens and NFTs all from a client and not have to deploy a program. Like it definitely it's weird, right? Because the programming model in Solana is, I think, quite challenging. Even now. It's significantly easier and it's getting easier, but it is kind of a different paradigm. But so it's like on the one hand, steep learning curve, but on the other, you don't need to do program development for a huge subset of use cases. You can just do it all from a client, which is super awesome because it means the lift for a lot of people is actually just like, oh, here's the 5 functions you need to use from the Web3 package, and
Yeah,
like have at it.
I think there's this common misconception that people are weary of like building on blockchain because I have to learn Rust, I have to write smart contracts. The reality is these are numbers I'm pulling out of my ass, but like it's probably roughly true. Is it like the demand for devs in blockchain is probably 80% like front end client
Mhm.
work and then 20% smart contract.
Absolutely.
And even the ones who are writing smart contracts will tell you that 20% of their time is writing those smart contracts. The other 80% is trying to figure out how the hell to get that to work with their React front end.
With the Exactly. No, that's exactly right. It might even be more extreme than that, right? Like it might even be like 90-10. I've been approached by a number of people for projects, and it's almost overwhelmingly like they it's kind of pitched as like, hey, we're doing this thing on the blockchain, but once we really dig into the spec of what they want to build, it's like, oh, you want a front end that interacts with some stuff that already exists. Cool, we can do that fairly easily, you know. That being said, that's not to diminish from the people who are digging in to like the really hard stuff, because like there are still plenty of problems to solve on the blockchain, and plenty of people who like do chew a shit ton of glass in order to do some really awesome stuff.
Yeah, and we need those, and we need those people here. Like now, luckily, there's that sort of core dev community call, and you have people from like Jito and the Mev world, and then like people from Mango, and there's like a lot of people like Solana Labs is not the only person building out the blockchain right now. There's tons and tons of contributors outside of that core team, and without those people, like I always like to make like I don't even like people to go directly personally to go directly to Anchor. It's like, here, learn some of these concepts of Rust so you at least understand what's happening under the hood. But we need those people that are still chewing glass because there's a lot of like very low level stuff that still needs to be solved. So basically, people chewing glass so everybody else doesn't have to is sort of like the meme around that.
Yeah, yeah. So when you started as sort of sole dev advocate, you'd already been in dev advocacy for, it sounds like, a year or so,
Oh
maybe
yeah, it was like a
longer,
year and a half
year
or
or
two
two.
years. Yeah.
2 years. Okay, so probably closer to 2 years. Cool. Um, I'm curious, like, how your approach to developer advocacy has scaled, because it clearly has. Like you are everywhere on Twitter and somehow like know everyone. And I'm super curious to know how that journey was for you, going from like, yeah, I just know a couple of people in the space and like I'm here to support them, to, oh, I'm trying to track tens of thousands of people in the space and still make meaningful connections for people, still make sure people get the resources they need. Like you've done a phenomenal job, I think, of connecting people, and I'm super curious to know how you, like, what that journey was like for you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just made it all up as I went along. I had no idea, because at Ken, it was like you're trying to beg people to come and build on Ken because it was like lesser known or whatever. And then Solana came around, and there's just this massive sort of the opposite problem. This massive amount of people that needed information now. One person could not like actually do that. So it was just like scale through the community. Like I said, I watched Discord to see who were the altruistic contributors in the ecosystem. I'd send them a DM, like this like weird LinkedIn like crypto guy, like asking like what they're up to, and started eventually finding there was a lot of people who just wanted to help, and I put them all on a Discord. Jacob Creech and some of these who leads DevRel now was like one of them, and just asked them if they would like help write like content or just continue doing what they're doing, like just making a relationship. So they stuck around, continued to do Discord support or like write a piece of content on how to do a thing. And eventually that turned into content being created, and then I would share it on Twitter, and then eventually it became this thing where like I was the only content distributor of Solana. Everybody else is building, nobody else is working on content. So somebody would write it, share it with me, I would retweet it, and then this flywheel of everybody like wanting to be the first to like write the first piece of content on this thing would send it to me. And that's sort of how my Twitter presence grew, is like people would follow me because they would see the latest and greatest stuff. Now we have a ton more efforts, and obviously at some point in time through that process, Italo over at Ironforge, who you obviously know, was like, this is horrible to find content on here. I have this idea for something called Soul Dev. And I was like, I was going to do that, but if you want to do that, I'll give you a grant and then I don't have to do it. And then he did. And it basically became like an early days, which is being revamped now, obviously. But back then it was like just a content aggregator, categorized, so you could find smart contract security, like front end stuff. So it was a really helpful tool in the very beginning. And then another sort of element of this early stage was like Super Team. When Jacob and Donnie started building the Solana cookbook, they wrote probably 80% of it. They basically took their Super Team, which was like very unknown at the time, and just deployed them at cookbook to fill that whole thing out. And then if they contributed, they got this Glass and Eater NFT. And like that was like sort of like the very beginning of a lot of this stuff.
That's cool. I didn't know that thing about the Glass Eater
Nice.
NFT. I love that. It sounds like
Yeah.
one of the things that
Colin has one,
does he
actually.
really?
Colin,
That makes sense. I believe that. So there's like this general theme of like developer education that's just been getting better and better through all the different means of everything that Foundation does, and then throughout the entire ecosystem. What's your kind of viewpoint on, I guess, like general Solana education of where the pitfalls are now and like where it can kind of go to the future? Like, spoiler alert, there's a job opening that is gonna fill that gap there.
Yeah, I think like especially with Nick, I know you're like working on a lot of docs. That was a huge pain point. Our documentation never actually taught anybody anything except like it showed you an RPC like stuff. It had some programming model stuff, and then some big massive paragraphs that literally didn't teach you how to build anything. They just talked about the programs on Solana. So it wasn't really, it was good for people who were interested in that and like learning about the programming model, but it didn't teach you how to build. Then the cookbook sort of filled that gap. It's like, lots of young learners like to use these sort of like code snippets and like sort of like shorter form like information. And since then, I think we have James, who I contacted and begged him to build a course over a year ago at this point, I think, and filled a lot of those gaps. But I think one of the gaps that's really missing is like we talk, DevRel sort of mostly focuses on sort of base level like building on Solana, but what's really missing is vertical focused education. Like there's no real true DeFi education, or there's no, like, there's NFT education, there's no DeFi education. There's a handful of like payments, like there's some out there, but I think there's some gaps there. I think advanced content is missing as well, like, but it took a long time to just start to fill those little micro gaps. But now gaming's becoming a big thing, and we have like Jonas is on DevRel, who's like focused on that. So it's like the second that you think that you have all the gaps filled and you have enough mind space to start looking around, you're like, holy shit, there's like 1,000 more things that we haven't been thinking about because we were so focused. Like there's unlimited gaps. I think you can, depending on how granular you go, but like James's course was one of the best like sort of starting points, because we talked about this on Twitter. It's like, this was never meant to be like the course that everybody uses to learn Solana. This is like the order of operations on how we think that would be most efficient to learn it. And then other people can take that, spin it off, add to it, do more things with it. So that's my general thing. I think Nick, you would probably have a better insight, just like sort of being a little bit newer around here, to like where you think some of the gaps are.
I mean, like broadly, there has been the last, I'd say like year and a half, there's been a lot of more entry level content, like we were just talking about. And like a lot of those gaps are being filled partially by the course that James has been working on. And there's like the more, I guess, like wholesome, like full like module within the course of like, here's like Solana Pay, like here's how to do everything with Solana Pay. And like you get like the full spectrum of all the basics. But yeah, I agree. There's definitely a lack of more advanced content of how to do different specific things. And I think that's like generally within the DevRel team, like that's kind of one of our goals, is to make lots more content, but B, making it so in a way the advanced things that a lot of companies and projects are built on, like having that like reference implementations and reference code of how to understand how those different things work, having that just available to the community, I think is just going to foster so much more cool projects that actually get built, to make it so there's more open source everything, which is a net positive for the entire ecosystem, but making it so like more and more cool projects and more cool businesses get built doing more and more cool things, and just kind of getting that flywheel going and just expanding faster and faster.
Yeah, I think the reference implementation example was like a really good thing that's missing. There's a lot out there, but like some of these are very meaty sort of like projects, but there's nothing that's like super digestible. And you create those reference implementations, you give it some good documentation, you let people really sort of like understand how it works, and maybe they take that and build on top of it. Maybe they just go build something similar. So I think that's an important part. And I also know that you guys have been working on a boot camp. So
Ooh,
like that's
a
going to
boot
be
camp.
super cool.
Never heard of one.
So you both have more insight into this than I do, I'm sure. Obviously there's got to be a two-pronged approach here, and so both matter. But I'm curious, when we're sort of comparing the need for more devs versus the need to upskill existing devs, which of those would you say is more of a priority today, given where Solana is at right now?
I would say that through DevRel and through like, for context, I spend a lot of my time like just sort of scouting the world for educators like that would be that want to teach Solana, whether it's in India, Turkey, Africa. Like we're all sort of trying to find those, taking something like your course, James, and handing it over for them to teach. There's this, like, you've been part of it, like Nas Academy, which is taking place. It had thousands of signups and like hundreds of people going through this. I think we're really, really good at top of funnel, almost too good that there's like a lack of opportunities. And the only way to really create opportunities is to create new projects. So, and I think we do really good, and people were able to get up onto speed to Solana pretty well right now. And like, we can do it like very quickly. I think the getting somebody from like, I know how to build on Solana to like, I'm comfortable enough to like ship to mainnet on Solana. And that's probably where my bias is towards, is more so the upskilling.
the upskilling. So you mentioned in passing another thing, you sort of in addition to upskilling, which is like having a place to land once you're upskilled, having having a project to work on, whether it's your own or like working for another protocol or project. Um, that does not seem that almost seems like a much harder problem, right? Like the path to train devs while it was a struggle for a while we were figuring it out, it's like it is a fairly deterministic path. We understand how to teach people how to develop on Solana, amongst other things, right? The path to someone, creating someone who like understands end users and create and can create like a product that people actually want, that seems way more abstract. And maybe that's outside the scope of like dev advocacy, but also it sound you even mentioning it makes it seem like, yeah, it is tangential and related. And I'm curious like how much of your mind space is taken up thinking about how do we get uh better like product people, I guess,
Yeah,
in
so
the space.
I think we're talking about two separate things. Both are important. One is upskilling a dev to where like he could actually build a product, and like that
Yeah.
that would be like secure and like have all this like all the sort of skills to really truly ship something like and be comfortable with that. Like, there's like this flow of like you do a tutorial, then you go to one of these lightweight boot camps, and then you move on to something like Web3 Builders Alliance, which they're like one of the newer educators in the space. And these guys are taking in somebody who already have skills on Solana, and then they'll teach them hands-on for multiple weeks, and then they'll put them on a capstone project and work with them as they build it out. So this is sort of like the next layer of maturity. Um, but the product side is something that like Mert from Helios talks about a lot. I think if
Yep.
I have this other like little stupid thing I say is like right now crypto is mostly devs building for devs into gens, and not a whole lot of people are actually thinking about like what can I build that's going to bring in a lot of users and actually give somebody a purpose or reason to use this thing outside of gambling. Um,
Yeah, I would also agree with that too.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely a lot of devs building things that people in the space will already use, not necessarily building new things to bring new people in. And that's kind of one of the places that blockchain in general kind of is really falling short of right now. Like, it's a bear market. I'm sure people are building really cool things, and I've seen cool things, but not really something that is gonna really bring in the next large wave of new people to the space. And that's kind of what we need.
The interesting thing, right, is like both of those things matter, and I don't think you can wait on. It's like I don't think you can wait for mainstream adoption to have developers ready. It's like developers need to be ready to build stuff before that happens. So I mean, I guess an example of how I'm thinking about it is like take a project like Dialect, for example. If Dialect becomes the thing that onboards a bunch of like end users rather than devs, it's like their team's going to explode quickly in order to keep up with like the demand for their product, and those devs need to exist and be capable and ready to like step in and work on that project.
I mean,
So
that's partially where all
um
the different
like I
education aspects come in, the tutorials, the guides, full courses,
yeah,
full education pipeline to make sure that when projects do actually take off and they need to scale with more people, there are people available. So it's building up that flywheel.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's also like I said, we're doing really well with getting lots of new people in, and like it really at that point once you've gone through a boot camp or you've been educated, it really becomes this sort of personal choice on whether you decide to go deeper. These are like these boot camps, like
Mm-hmm.
one, they teach you how to build, but two, they're also sort of this like marketing world to sort of like the build spaces to get people interested. But the ones that become like more successful are the ones that just decide to go for it. Like I'll give an example, like Tensor, I met like one of the co-founders 2 years ago, just talking in Discord, and he just stuck around and kept grinding it out, and they just now saw success 2 years later. Not everybody has that sort of grit and willingness to stick around for that amount of time, without some sort of opportunity or guaranteed opportunity at the end of it. That's another missing piece. It's like connecting these devs to opportunities, whether it's founding a company or joining a team, because running through a boot camp does not qualify you to like get hired at a company. Like,
agreed.
I mean, for the most part, some people do have that like ability coming out of one of those. It's just all personal thing, but like the majority just don't. You a lot of people when they're building on Solana, what I've noticed is like don't even really know what cryptography is. They just start building a dApp and they don't even have that backbone of like, what does this actually mean? So there's some things around that. Overall, there's a lot of work to be done, but really connecting devs to opportunities, the ones that are ready, is also like this missing gap when you look at it as like a funnel. Like you're bringing them in, they're doing some things, they're getting through, then they finally go through something like WBA and they're ready, and it's like now it's like, how do I get that person in front of the right people to get an opportunity without having to like apply on LinkedIn and get stuck in a stack of resumes? Like we've lots of people do this like on-chain credentialing, but like, is that meaningful to people that are hiring? Maybe, but probably not really, unless there was just some hardcore certification program that like proves that you are like top quality developer. So
What do you? I mean, what's your hypothesis for the solution to that?
I mean, like there's some like really in the middle solutions, which is like jobs.solana.com and earn.superteam.fun, but like in a scalable way, I have no idea. And I think about this a lot. Like, what's the most scalable way? Because if you have these teams and it's like two guys and they're hiring one person, and then you just trained up like 1,000 people, like how do you solve that problem? Like grants and bounties is like it's starting to become a gig economy in crypto, which I think is totally fine. It like lets you like test out, like I need some contract work done. You build up a little bit of resume. A lot of times, like Armani literally hires people straight out of GitHub that he's never met before because they're
I
contributing.
love that.
So this is weird. This is weird for like people like in the Web2 space. This is why students can get used to this, and like people from colleges can get used to it earlier. But like you talked about like some mid-career person like James, like why would he come over here to into crypto when he has a nice cushy job and he knows he can't just apply through LinkedIn and I like gotta go like do a PR on GitHub to get a job? Like no fucking way. So it's I don't know if there's like a real solid answer right now. We need more job creation and we need better things that attract other people. Like, hey, I would love an example like Dialect. Like they've built a really killer product. That's something that exists in Web 2 and it's now starting to exist in Web 3. Like that would be something that a Web 2 person might be really interested like to work on. But an NFT like marketplace or some DeFi protocol, that's not as attractive because they might not understand it. So
Yeah, I think it's like a really
but
hard thing to solve because like inherently with and I feel strongly about this phrase, but like we are early, that classic phrase. And it's like, yeah, it's still an early space, and developers and people that are building projects and companies, they are inherently lean and they don't need to have a lot of like personnel power in order to accomplish whatever their jobs to be done is. So it's like they like Tensor is basically what 2-3 people, and they've taken over Magic Eden in 24-hour NFT volume. Like that's super impressive, but they don't need to hire 10, 15, 20, 100 people in order to maintain where they're at. Like they'll probably hire some, but a lot of the quote unquote Web3 companies that are getting traction with their products, they're very lean teams and they just don't need to hire. And that's kind of, it's a blessing and a curse, I guess, because like you're getting a really good product and it's getting a lot of adoption, but you hire like one quote unquote 10x dev and you're just off to the races. You don't need to hire 15 people.
yeah, it just boils down to we just like right now you're seeing a lot of people build a lot of the same stuff. And like until we like get out of that, it's it's just going to be a challenge for a while. But right now it's just like you don't want to stop that educational flywheel,
Agreed.
because you train 1,000 people, if 5 of those come out of there and they start a business and become extremely successful, then it was all worth it. And then the other ones might long tail come back whenever they like decide to peep back in, and they were the first blockchain they were exposed to was Solana, and then they come back one day. So it's really hard to gauge. Like, that's one of the more challenging things, how well you're doing. You didn't build some developer platform where you can check the number of unique API requests, because so like there's no way to, the only way we can track is open source repos that have Solana code in them. But as we know, that's a much lower percentage than the closed source projects, because it's very competitive on Solana, and you can build real products and the competition is fierce. So there's just, people are less inclined to open source that code. It sucks, but it's like, not every,
Yeah.
like Solana didn't inherit the ethos of open source like Bitcoin and Ethereum did. And like a lot of people, if you talk to them, they're not Ethereum conversions. These are like, Solana's mostly crypto, or like Solana
Solana
natives.
natives.
Like almost the majority of them all, this was their first blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, there's a theme to like a lot of these things that we're talking about, which is, hey, they're challenging problems, and they were challenging problems 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and like the the team, you and the team have like slowly worked through them and come really far. So I have no doubt that like 2 years from now, everything we're talking about now will feel like it's been solved or is so much further along. I wanna switch gears slightly and be like, these are really hard problems. Uh, what motivates you personally to stick with it? Like what makes you day in, day out be like, this is worth me solving. This is worth me paying attention to and giving my heart and soul to.
I mean, number one, I actually truly believe that there's some real things that blockchain does solve, and like lots of things around identity and like just like owning your own assets, right? Like having custody of your own stuff and DeFi. But my personal motivation is more on the side of like, when I was an engineer and I was like struggling with a problem and then I finally solved it, it was like such a good feeling. But for now, it's like building out this education, or like helping somebody get to that next stage, and then receiving a message back and saying like, hey, I now work for X company thanks to like this thing that you did. Like, that's the real reward that I get, like that's sort of like my sort of motivating factor, that you're contributing to something that you believe in that has a real strong future, even though right now it's like people are still somewhat skeptical of it. But for me personally, it's like, I think I'm with the right blockchain that has the best chance to actually solve this, if it's solvable, like in terms of real use cases, and just being able to be part of building out that framework to where one day you don't really need to full, like just being at the beginning of something that is going to evolve into something like 100 times better is just a rewarding feeling. And watching people like take the things that DevRel does, and that like that all these other groups that I work with and that we work with are doing, it's just a really good feeling to see the successes out of that. That's what keeps me motivated personally.
So on the one hand, you're a true believer in Solana. Well, you're a true believer in blockchain technology. You're a true believer in Solana, and it sounds like it is incredibly rewarding for you personally to feel like you have helped people on an individual level.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, it's just like the greatest feeling ever. I mean, like even though that I don't like physically teach people, like if I contributed to it in some way, I can see why somebody who is a teacher is so rewarded, like feels so rewarded to like help people like advance in their lives and careers, and another one is
Yeah.
working with groups like Super Team, and honestly bringing like a lot of like opportunity to places in this world that don't have it in their normal day, that can now go virtual and like change their lives and their families' lives because of the financial opportunities that exist, and that Web3 has sort of been enabling, that's also another motivating factor.
Yeah, love that.
Nice. I love that. For what it's worth, right? Is like maybe you didn't personally teach me Solana, but like everybody I know in the space I know through you, and like me going from I've been hired to do a job to I I actually like, oh, I also think this is like the chain that has the best chance of making this work, and I want to stick with it, like is because of the community that you've created, right? Like I was lucky enough to sort of get embedded in that sort of Twitter online community that you've created, and that's the thing that kept me around.
And I didn't create it. Like I call it this sort of like right place, right time, right people situation where like Toli was super vocal, and then you had Armani come along, who's like building Anchor and working on one of the first wallets on Solana. And then there was like and there was the team from Mango was there pretty early, and a lot of these just sort of like really smart people like that were just like on there that were willing to help you literally debug your code on Twitter. And like that culture was actually bred mostly on Twitter
Yeah.
by just people being
Well,
willing to help.
that's fair and humble of you to call out that you didn't create it. I will concede that maybe you are not the
He's
sole
just the
creator, but you are
Sherpa. He's just Sherpaing us along.
you are a big part you are a big part of that community, and you, more than anyone I've seen, I think, bring people into that community and try to make them feel welcome and a part of it. That can be hard, right? Like seeing that there is a community is not the same as feeling like I can join that community.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think that's
and
like
and I feel like your persona has tried to make that a welcoming environment so that people feel like, oh, I can do this. I can integrate with this community and belong.
yeah,
You know?
and like that's why like I say dumb stuff on Twitter, because it's like just like shit posting with everybody, because like it makes you relatable. You don't feel like this like unattainable person. It's the same with Toli, the same with Austin Federa. Like you want to be able to like be in that community and know what it feels like to actually understand what like people are saying and feeling. And it's like such a unique thing. Like, and also I'm addicted to Twitter, but like that's a different story. But my goal was
multiple
to
slices.
hang up my Twitter spurs and like let Nick take over being Chase for a while.
Ooh,
Perfect.
big shoes to fill.
Nick, you gotta like 30x that
I'm working on it.
following
I'm
and,
working on it. All right.
make this happen.
You can just buy one of those like 100,000 follower bot
Oh my
accounts and
goodness.
just port your name
Oh
over.
my goodness.
Like all the
Is that how you did it, Chase?
No,
Was that the
no, I started with one follower. All the scam and NFT projects that like literally
it's the worst.
first tweet they have like 250,000 followers. You're like, interesting.
You're like, that seems sus. That honestly, like that is the embodiment of the worst aspects of crypto culture is that right there. And if you can push that aside and sort of get past that, I think there is a world of like legitimate awesome stuff inside of the world of crypto. But I definitely can empathize with people who are new to it and feeling like this feels a little scammy. I don't know if this right. To those people, I would say like there's more beyond that. Trust me. Like figure out how to be a user and how to stay safe, and like there's really cool stuff behind
And there's
that
cool
wall,
people building cool things.
And yeah, it honestly, more than anything, that's what it is right now, is cool people building cool things, right? And I think there are a couple of solid use cases, and I have a lot of hope that there will be 10, 100, 1,000 times the use cases, 3 to 10 years from now. It's kind of my personal thought.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. All right, great. I guess let's go ahead and wrap it here. Like, this was great. Thanks for joining us, Chase, and sharing your thoughts on the broader education within Solana and kind of your backstory. It's been great.
Yeah, man. Like it's cool. Like I'm happy to join. It's like two of my familiar shit posting friends online. It's always good to like join a podcast with them. But I mean, like I think the future is bright for Solana and future Solana developers. It's getting easier day by day. Like again, like Nick and Jacob and the rest of the DevRel team producing everything from workshops to boot camps to like to new verticals like gaming and the stuff. It will start to get a little more attention as the website may or may not be getting upgraded and sometime in the near to distant future.
Spoiler alert.
And also probably
Nice.
hopefully some nice marketing efforts around this, because I think one of the hardest parts, and you see this feedback a lot, is like, I can't find how to build on Solana, and it's like, did you look? But like, this is also our own fault, because it's like there's the discoverability problem, and like this boils down to SEO.
Yeah.
But anyways, I won't dive back into it. I appreciate you guys having me. This was really cool.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for joining. Thanks for for your
Thanks
thoughts
a lot.
on the education in the space. What devs need, that kind of stuff. I think it's helpful, right? Like, and anyone who's listening who wants to get involved and wants to help out with Solana education and sort of making content, definitely reach out to any of the three of us. I think all three of us here are really invested in making that happen, and can either immediately bring you onto a project to help with content related stuff, or point you in the right direction to find stuff to work on.
Cool. Well,
Sweet.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
See you here on Twitter in a few minutes.
Yeah. You should post in here in a minute. All right, to all the followers, next week we'll
Bye-bye.
see y'all.